My name is Qiang, and I never believed in heaven or hell, at least not the way others spoke about them in temples or stories whispered at night. I was born in a quiet fishing town in southern China, where the mountains met the river and every day began with the call of roosters and the smell of jasmine tea. My father was a tailor, careful and patient, and my mother grew herbs in clay pots by the window. From them, I learned stillness. I learned to listen before speaking, to bow to life rather than wrestle with it. Even as a boy, I felt drawn to silence. I would sit near the old pagoda after school, watching candles flicker against stone walls, the smoke curling upward like small prayers. I studied Buddhism not from fear of sin, but from curiosity about peace. Karma, detachment, balance. These weren't distant ideas to me. They were the way I kept my footing in a world that could so easily tilt into madness. I never sought fame, never chased money. My joy was in routine, rising before dawn, washing rice, feeding stray cats, lighting incense to honor gratitude itself. When I imagined death, it was never dark or cruel. I thought of it like the tide pulling gently out to sea, leaving the shore quiet, clean. I wasn't afraid. I believed I understood the pattern, but belief is a fragile thing. I was 51 the night everything changed. My body had been loyal, strong. I walked every morning before sunrise, circling the temple 3 times before breakfast. I fasted on the first day of each month, kept my mind clear, my habits simple. My small apartment smelled of sandalwood and tea. On that evening, I remember the sound of rain tapping on the window and the warmth of the cup I had just poured. Then came a pressure behind my eyes, small at first, a whisper of pain. I ignored it. I told myself it would pass, but it didn't. The pressure grew sharper, heavier, as though the air itself was pushing me down. The world tilted. My knees buckled. I tried to reach for the table, for balance, for something real, but my hand froze in midair. The tea was still steaming. The chair was still turned slightly toward the window, and then I was on the floor. No struggle, no cry, just a quiet fall into stillness. My last breath came like a sigh I didn't know I was holding. Then silence, and then not silence. It was not the nothingness I expected, not fading, not peace. What came next felt like waking up inside awareness itself. My first thought was confusion. Why do I still feel like me? I could sense everything, my thoughts, my memory, even the echo of my heartbeat, though I had none. I wasn't breathing, yet I felt breath. I wasn't seeing with eyes, yet I saw. But what I saw was not my room. It was vast, boundless, like standing in the middle of the sky with no ground, no horizon. There was no tunnel, no bright light pulling me in. It was more like being suspended in a sea of air that shimmered with something alive, something knowing. It felt as if I was being seen, but not by eyes. I felt stripped bare, not physically, but in a way that reached deeper than the body. Every thought, every secret, every reason behind every choice I had ever made was visible. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't gentle either. It was exact. At first, I tried to calm myself. I told myself this must be the process of dying, maybe the mind's last illusion, but it didn't fade. The awareness grew until I realized something else. This wasn't the cycle I had studied. This wasn't rebirth. This wasn't release. This was something entirely different. I felt myself being drawn toward a presence, vast and beyond measure. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it moving closer, like gravity made of intelligence. That's when I felt panic, the kind I hadn't known since childhood. I thought I had lived rightly. I had harmed no one. I had practiced humility, patience, honesty, but standing or existing in that place, I felt the truth slide into me like a blade made of light. I had missed something, not by evil, but by distance. I had lived carefully, yes, but not fully. I had hidden behind discipline, behind calmness, behind silence. I had built a life so clean it left no fingerprints on the world. The realization hurt more than any wound. It wasn't judgment, not as I had imagined it. It was truth, absolute and alive, and it didn't ask for permission to be seen. I wanted to turn away, but there was nowhere to turn. My life unfolded before me, not as pictures or memories, but as feelings, moments woven together, each one revealing the weight of my intentions. Every choice was shown not as what I did, but why. And it was then, in that unbearable clarity, that I felt it, a shift. A presence entered, and everything changed. Something began to move toward me, not fast, not loud, but with a power that filled everything. It was not a thing, not a shadow, not a beam of light, but a presence unmistakably alive. It stood at the border of what I can only call existence itself, at the edge where time didn't flow but simply hovered, still and endless. Yet in that stillness, an urgency started to rise like a tide. What I felt next was new, something I had never known in all my searching. It wasn't force, it wasn't fear, it was warmth, radiant and deep, a kind of gravity that didn't pull or push, but drew me closer by simply being what it was. My soul stirred before I could think, as if answering a voice that had not yet spoken. And in that instant, I knew, without reason, without words, that someone had entered this place, someone unlike anyone I had ever known or imagined. At first, I resisted the thought. No, that can't be, I told myself. I never believed in that. I never prayed to that name. I never followed that path. I was never one of those people, but my soul knew, even when my mind refused. My defenses fell, one by one, like dust slipping through open hands. The presence did not rush toward me. It came gently, steadily, certain. I wasn't rising into a higher part of myself, and I wasn't dissolving into another form of life. I was about to meet the one I had never known, but who had always known me. Everything I thought I understood about death, awakening, and truth was being rewritten from the inside out. When I left my body, I expected nothing. Or maybe I expected the theories I had repeated for years to finally prove true. Emptiness, silence, detachment. I believed that death was a release, a transition, a return to the vast quiet beyond thought and ego. Either I would blend into the great field of energy, or I would vanish completely. But what came next shattered that idea. I was aware, intensely aware. Aware of myself, not just floating consciousness, but me, sharp and alive in ways I had never been while breathing. I remembered who I was. I felt more alive in death than I ever had in life. I was standing, or maybe suspended, in something that wasn't a place, but wasn't nothing either. It wasn't heaven. It wasn't hell. It wasn't like anything I'd ever read in sacred texts or heard from teachers. No angels, no ancestors, no golden light, no chance, no gates. The space was alive and still at once, empty but full, terrifying but magnetic. Around me, the air shimmered like sunlight behind moving water, bending and breathing in colors I can't describe. Every time I tried to focus on it, it shifted, as if my thoughts themselves changed its shape. The silence wasn't gentle. It was awake, aware, like it was waiting for something. I knew I was being seen, not watched, but known. Then images began to rise around me, fragments of my life. Not like a movie, but like leaves drifting past on a slow river. Each one carried weight, each one carried feeling. I saw myself at my mother's bedside, pretending to be strong when I wanted to beg her not to go. I saw the way I turned away from my younger brother after our last argument, choosing pride over peace. I saw the nights I sat teaching about compassion while secretly feeling superior for doing so. And yes, I saw the quiet good moments too. The time I gave my coat to a man sleeping on the street, the nights I comforted strangers online who were ready to give up. But even those carried a subtle taste of pride. None of it was purely evil, but none of it was purely love either. It hit me hard. I had lived most of my life, not by healing my pain, but by escaping it. I had called numbness peace. I had called control wisdom. I had built walls and called them enlightenment. In that place where no lie could stand, I saw myself clearly, a man who had spent his life hiding. There was no judge, no voice of accusation, no word of guilty. But I felt the absence of love in every moment I had turned away from it. It wasn't punishment. It was truth, raw and total. And then, as if the space itself took a breath, something began to shift. The dim, flickering shadows around me suddenly shattered, like glass breaking in slow motion. It wasn't the gentle rise of dawn, the soft glow of morning sunlight. It was something else entirely. This light wasn't warm or distant like the first rays of a sunrise. No, this light hit me, sharp and clear, as if a curtain had been ripped open in an instant. One moment I was wrapped in my thoughts, lost in the swirling, quiet chaos of my mind. The next, I wasn't alone anymore. The light didn't ask permission. It didn't offer comfort or kindness. It didn't speak to me with sweet words. It exposed me. Every part of me, every hidden desire, every dark corner I'd carefully kept buried, it was all laid bare, like peeling away 1,000 layers of my life. I couldn't hide. I wanted to, but I couldn't. And in that moment, I wasn't afraid of pain. I was terrified of being seen, truly seen. It didn't come to offer peace. Not the kind of truth you read in books or ponder in your quietest moments. No. This was the kind of truth that rips you open, rearranges the very core of you, and shows you exactly who you've become when no one is watching. But strangely, the light wasn't angry. It wasn't disgusted or disappointed. It wasn't even judging me. It was waiting. It was almost as if the light was asking, now that you see, will you be honest? There was no voice, but somehow I knew it was waiting for an answer. I couldn't speak, but inside my heart responded with a quiet, reluctant yes. And then, things started to shift. The fragments of my life, scattered like dust in the wind, began to pull together. They didn't just float aimlessly anymore. They aligned, slowly, purposefully, like stars coming into place in a sky I hadn't even noticed before. It wasn't random. I wasn't just drifting through existence, hoping to find meaning. My life had been leading somewhere, all along, even when I didn't know it. Every detour I'd taken, every step I had thought was a mistake, even that had been part of it. And in the quiet that followed, I realized, even in my silence, truth had been reaching for me. I felt it then, that presence. It wasn't just a force, a power, something intangible. It was a person, a living, breathing presence that filled the space around me. I couldn't see him yet, but I could feel him deep down, like a gravitational pull in my soul. Strong, yes, but there was something familiar about it too, like someone I'd known my whole life, but never truly met. I wasn't alone, and yet I was alone with him, and I knew he wasn't here to destroy me. He was here to introduce himself. At first, there was nothing but light, even brighter now, but not overwhelming. It wasn't light that forced me away. It was light that beckoned me closer. With each step, it seemed to pull me in, a weightless gravity that wasn't crushing but defining. It was the kind of weight that made everything feel real, more real than anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't something my senses could fully comprehend, but I knew. Deep down, I knew. And there I stood, if standing was even the word, suspended between the life I'd lived and the one that was now unfolding before me. My past beliefs, my entire sense of self, it all began to feel distant, like they belonged to someone else. But more than that, it was as if I could feel something else now. Someone else. I couldn't see his face at first. The light around him was too pure, too alive. It wasn't sunlight, it wasn't energy, it wasn't even warmth. This light wasn't just something that shone, it was alive, it was conscious, it was searching. And then through the light, a figure began to emerge. He wasn't just a man, he was more. More than human, more than I could understand. His robes were white, flowing like something not bound by the world, not touched by the weight of gravity. His hands, scarred yet strong, reached out as though pulling the very universe into focus with a simple gesture. In his presence, everything else vanished. Even my memories, the ones I clung to so tightly, seemed to fade. I was no longer thinking about my life or what came next. I was only thinking about him. And then I realized I had never known him. Not truly. Oh, I had heard of him. He was just a figure, a name, a concept, someone from another world, someone I admired from a distance, perhaps. Jesus, I had respected his teachings, yes, but I had never known him. But in that moment, I did. I couldn't explain how, but I recognized him. Not in my thoughts, but in my soul. It wasn't intellectual, it was something deeper. It was like something long forgotten had suddenly come back to life inside of me. I knew him, my spirit knew him, and my knees buckled. Though I didn't have a body to kneel on, I fell before him, not out of fear, but out of awe. There was no ego left to protect, no argument to win. I bowed because I couldn't not. He hadn't said a word, yet in that silence, I was undone. He hadn't spoken to me. He didn't need to. But when he did, the words came with weight. His voice was like nothing I had ever heard before. Not loud, but powerful. It didn't just reach my ears, it reached into me, deep into the core of who I was. Every barrier I'd ever put up, every part of me that had hidden, every mask I'd worn, it all crumbled. His voice didn't simply speak, it called me. You have sought truth, he said. Now I will show you what truth really is. It wasn't a rebuke, it wasn't correction, it was an invitation. I had searched, yes, but now the search was ending. Not in a thought, not in a theory, but in him, in the living truth standing before me. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Why me? Why now? Why you? But as soon as I thought them, the questions melted away. They felt irrelevant, small. Everything I thought I understood, All the years spent meditating, studying, seeking answers, it all seemed so incomplete. Because nothing had prepared me for this, for standing before the very source of truth and realizing, for the first time in my life, that truth isn't a teaching or an idea. Truth is a person, and that person was Jesus. He didn't begin with doctrines. He didn't recite scriptures or preach. He didn't try to convert me or shame me. He didn't need to. He simply stood there, and in his gaze, everything shifted. The world I had known, the life I had lived, it all became clearer in his light. Not through accusation, but with a purity that hurt in the best way. As he stepped closer, I felt something inside me begin to melt. My pride, my philosophy, my desire to protect myself, they all fell away, not because he crushed them, but because they became so insignificant in his presence. You sought peace through detachment, he said. But peace is not the absence of desire, it is the presence of love. You tried to purify yourself through discipline, he continued. But holiness is not earned, it is given. You studied emptiness, he said, his voice soft but firm. But I am fullness. And with every word he spoke, something in me changed. It wasn't just knowledge, it was transformation. My heart was opening in ways I'd never known were possible. With every sentence, my understanding shifted, deeper and deeper. I stood there, everything I had fought for, everything I thought I had been chasing, none of it felt like it was meant for me. All those years spent running after balance, harmony, control, they were like shadows. I was after something I didn't even understand. But then he showed me something I never could have imagined, something far greater. I broke inside. I wept, but it wasn't out of guilt. It was like I was waking up from a long, heavy sleep. I hadn't just met truth, I had met truth himself. And the most unexpected thing? He wasn't turning me away. He wasn't pointing out my failures or throwing my past in my face. No, he was welcoming me home, like I was the one he had been waiting for. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just some spiritual milestone. This wasn't a step forward in a cycle of reincarnation. It wasn't merging with some universal mind or returning to the formless energy I'd once believed in. No, this was an invitation into something so much more personal. This was a relationship. And for the first time in my life, I realized something I never had before. I didn't want to transcend anymore. I wanted to surrender. Because I finally found the one who was worth surrendering to. When Jesus spoke to me again, I thought that moment of truth had already hit its deepest point. I had already bowed before his authority. I had already felt the crumbling of all my beliefs, all my ideas about the world. But I was wrong. What came next wasn't just about knowing who he was. It was about seeing who I had been. I hadn't just encountered a moment of clarity. I was exposed. Completely, uncomfortably exposed. But I didn't ask for this. I didn't even know I needed it until it happened. He didn't push me. He didn't force me to look at myself. He didn't shout, "Look at who you've become." No, he just stepped aside. And that's when everything changed. The space around us seemed to stretch, expand like an ancient scroll unfolding before my eyes. I wasn't sucked into a tunnel or caught in some cosmic movie of my life. No, I was right there, standing still, watching fragments of my past rise up around me, moments, images, habits, all of them layered together. It wasn't just about what I had done, it was about why I did it. And it wasn't just about what people saw, it was what he had seen. At first, the memories were soft, almost nostalgic. I saw a teacher praising me for my discipline. I saw my grandmother smiling at me when I cleaned the temple floor for her, the incense curling through the air on those quiet mornings. The stillness I had convinced myself was peace. But as I looked closer, I saw something shift. It was like I was holding up a piece of glass to the light and watching everything change. Suddenly, those same moments were no longer so simple. I saw pride hiding behind my humility. I saw control masquerading as composure. I saw fear pretending to be detachment. And that's when I realized I hadn't spent my life in surrender. No, I had spent it managing. I was managing my emotions, managing what people expected of me, managing my pain. I had taken all those teachings of Buddhism I held so close and used them, not to open myself, but to hide. I thought I was at peace, but what I had really done was build a fortress. A silent wall, not made of stone, but made of silence. I had convinced myself that detachment was compassion, that distancing myself from others' pain was somehow wise. I told myself that suffering was part of the cycle, that everyone had their karma to deal with, and I hid behind that belief, thinking it made me strong. But now I saw the truth. What I thought was strength was nothing more than avoidance. I had avoided love because love would require vulnerability, and vulnerability would mean surrendering my illusion of control. Then something shook me. I saw myself at a funeral, standing there, palms pressed together, eyes closed. People thought I was calm. People thought I was peaceful. But from this new perspective, my heart was locked up tight. I wasn't calm. I wasn't strong. I was running from grief, from love, from connection, all because I was too afraid to let go. I thought I was enlightened, but I was just avoiding the one thing that could have made me free, love. That's when Jesus spoke again. His voice, soft but so clear, so sharp, it cut through the silence like a beam of light. You pursued stillness, he said, but not me. I broke in that moment. I had spent years, decades even, trying to quiet my mind, still my heart, control the storms within. But I never asked myself who was supposed to be on the other side of that stillness. I thought peace was the goal, but peace wasn't the goal. Peace was just the fruit, the byproduct of knowing him. I had settled for emptiness when I was made for presence. I had searched my whole life for awakening, and I had kept the one who could awaken me outside. And that's when I understood. All those years, I had used my beliefs like a shield, not out of malice, but out of desperation. I liked the idea that I was in control. I liked that there was no final judgment, no last reckoning, only movement forward or backward based on my own effort. It was a system that made me feel safe because I could be my own master. I could progress by my own discipline, and I had fooled everyone, including myself, into thinking I was centered, wise, even enlightened. But standing there before him, before the light that knew me inside and out, everything I had built came crashing down. I saw it then. I had missed everything. Not because I didn't try, but because I refused to surrender. My beliefs gave me structure, but they didn't give me relationship. They gave me practice, but not intimacy. They gave me order, but not transformation. I wasn't a bad man, but I wasn't a free one either. And then something I didn't expect happened. Instead of judgment, I felt his grief. Not mine, his. I realized that he had always been there, just waiting for me to see him. He had watched me search. He had seen me discipline myself, seen me chase after purity, always longing to be invited in. I saw all the little moments when his voice had whispered to me. Those moments I had brushed off as intuition, as energy, as random thoughts. But it wasn't random. It was him. All along, it was him. And in that moment, I knew. I had spent all those years seeking awakening while pushing the one who could awaken me away. I dropped to my knees again, whether physically or in spirit, I'm still not sure. But this time, it wasn't awe that brought me to the ground. It was repentance. A word I had never even considered before, something I didn't believe in. But now there was no shame in it, only the ache of realizing that love had been here all along, and I had missed it. I looked at him. No excuses, no justifications, just sorrow. A deep sorrow for all the years I had thought I was awake when, in reality, I had been sleeping through the greatest truth of all. And then he stepped closer. He didn't scold. He didn't point to my failures. No, he opened his arms, not as a judge, but as a father. And that's when it hit me. What I thought was the illusion of the world was actually the illusion of self. And that illusion shattered in the light of the one who had always loved me. The air around me didn't just move, it shifted, like time itself took a deep breath. It wasn't violent, it wasn't loud, but it was final, as if something eternal had decided to pull back its curtain just enough for me to see. And I did see. I saw him. Not a memory, not a symbol, not a thought wrapped in religion. Jesus on the cross, not painted, not imagined, real, alive, bleeding, breathing, dying, and yet more alive than anything I had ever touched or felt in my life. The air felt heavy, alive with something I could almost taste. The sky twisted above him, dark clouds pulsing like a heart. The ground beneath us trembled, not from thunder, but from meaning itself. The loudest sound was silence. A silence that spoke. A silence that carried the weight of everything. This was not a story. This was not some old legend or sacred poem. This was the center, the heartbeat of all things. And I had walked through life never seeing it. Never knowing that every question I asked, every search for truth, every quiet ache inside me pointed right here. I saw the weight on him. Not just the nails, not just the crown. Something deeper, something invisible, but heavier than mountains. It was the weight of separation itself. The distance between us and the Creator, between love and the lost, between life and death. For years I thought sin was just doing wrong, breaking moral laws, falling short of good behavior. I had called it imbalance, ignorance, bad energy. But here in this vision, I understood. Sin was separation, cold, lonely, eternal separation from the very source of life. And that separation was something I could climb out of. It wasn't a problem to fix. It was a chasm too wide to cross. Only one could bridge it. Only one ever did. I saw him hanging there, not as a victim, but as a choice. Not powerless, but full of power. Not taken, but giving. His eyes met mine, eyes that had seen eternity, eyes that carried galaxies, and somehow they looked straight into me, past my mistakes, past my name, past my skin, straight into the soul I didn't even know I had been hiding. I wasn't alive when it happened, and yet there I was, standing at the foot of his cross, my knees weak, my chest trembling. I felt no shame, no condemnation, only invitation. The same love that held him there was pulling me closer. Then came the flood. All of it. Every false word, every selfish moment, every time I turned my back on truth. The memories fell like stones into my chest. Every time I could have loved and didn't. Every time I hid behind silence when love was asking me to speak. Every time I pretended to be humble while feeding my pride. And yet it didn't crush me, because right there I saw it. He was carrying it. All of it. Mine, yours, everyone's. It wasn't an idea of sin he bore. It was personal. He carried me. I couldn't speak, but he could. His voice wasn't sound, it was life itself. He said, "You cannot repay what you owe, but I already paid it for you." Those words hit me harder than lightning. They broke something inside me. Every false belief I had built, every desperate religion of self-redemption I'd constructed in my heart, every quiet promise to do better, every invisible ladder I had climbed trying to earn my worth, it all fell. All my life I had tried to make myself good enough, worthy enough, balanced enough. But now I saw it was never about that. He had already done it, for me. Grace. I had heard that word my whole life, but I had never seen it. I had never felt it, until now. Grace wasn't a system or a reward. It wasn't karma, it wasn't fairness. Karma says you get what you deserve. Grace says you don't, and still, you are loved beyond measure. My chest tightened, my knees gave out, I fell, not because I had to, but because I couldn't stand in the weight of that love. Tears came from a place I didn't know existed. Sorrow and joy tangled together. Sorrow for the years I wasted trying to live without him. Joy because none of those years defined me anymore. I whispered from somewhere deep, "Why would you do this for me?" He didn't answer with words, but I heard it anyway. Clearer than sound. Because I love you, not as an idea, not from afar, but personally, eternally. And in that moment, I knew the cross wasn't a symbol, it was a doorway, a real one. And he was holding it open for me. I thought it was the end. I thought I had seen everything. What more could there be after that kind of love? After grace like that? But I was wrong. Grace isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a journey, a shift. He looked at me again, and this time, he didn't speak. He just turned, and suddenly the space around us started to shift again. What once felt like a still and endless quiet suddenly burst into life, alive with motion and purpose. It was as though a heavy curtain was drawn back from my eyes, and I could finally see, not the way I had always seen the world, but as it truly was, raw and unfiltered. The reality, beyond every illusion, beyond every mask I had worn. In front of me, two paths appeared. Not roads of dirt or stone, but two distinct directions. One was wide, almost inviting, smooth like a gentle hill, flowing without edges or boundaries. There was no pressure there, no confinement, just open space. And as I looked, I saw many souls drifting along it. They weren't running, weren't walking with urgency. They were gliding, almost suspended in time, unbothered. Some wore robes, others suits, some had the look of intellectuals, while others had the demeanor of the deeply spiritual. But they all shared the same thing, a sense of serenity. But there was something else too, a kind of emptiness in their eyes, a hollowness. They weren't walking toward anything, they were just walking. Toward what though? They didn't know, or maybe they didn't want to know. I stood there watching, feeling this strange weight in my chest, a sadness that reached deep inside me. The further they walked, the further they moved away from something, away from the light. And then I understood. This was the path of self-sufficiency. The path of those who had placed all their trust in their own efforts, their own goodness, their own enlightenment. They believed their sincerity alone would save them. They were too peaceful, too certain of their own purity to see the truth. They were lost. I could feel it in every fiber of my being, that despite their calm, despite their confidence, they were far from the light. Jesus turned to me, not with rebuke, but with a sadness I could feel deep in my chest. They've chosen independence over intimacy, he said. And I knew that could have been me. It was almost me. That could have been my road, my choice. He gestured toward the other path. This one was narrow, rugged, steep in some places. Fewer souls walked it, but each person on this path had something that I couldn't take my eyes off of. They glowed, not with their own light, but with something else, something that came from deep within them. These were people who were not perfect, not by any measure. Some limped, some were weeping, others looked like they had endured fire. But despite their struggles, there was joy in their walk. Not the shallow joy that comes from circumstances, but a deep, abiding joy that seemed to come from another realm. It was as if their entire being was illuminated by something more powerful than anything this world could offer. As I looked closer, I realized they weren't just walking toward Jesus. They were walking with him. Some carried Bibles, others didn't. Some wore robes, others jeans, but the one thing they all shared was this: surrender. Not weakness, but strength. They weren't trying to ascend to a higher plane through their own discipline. They had already been found. They weren't climbing toward God. They were following him. I glanced back at the wider path and it hit me. No one was forced to walk it. It was their choice, whether born from pride, pain, or simple unbelief. No one had been pushed. They had all chosen it, and none of them were turning back. I looked ahead, and I saw where each path led. The narrow road ended in a light so brilliant that I couldn't look at it directly, but I knew it was his destination. I could feel it. The light poured into me, a union that was more like music than anything else. I couldn't hear it, but I felt it deep in my soul. Love, purity, presence, home. But the wide road, it didn't end in flames. It didn't end in terror. It stretched on endlessly into dimness. It ended in a kind of hollow gray, a place where light couldn't reach, a place where truth didn't resonate anymore, where a soul could still exist, but without him. That's what hell was, not torment, not fire, but separation. A spirit that chose itself over surrender, a heart that said, I will walk alone until it faded into the dark. Jesus spoke softly, you see now, there is no awakening apart from me. Those words cracked open everything I had believed. I had thought I could rise to higher planes, that if I meditated enough, detached enough, earned my way, I could reach enlightenment. I had believed in reincarnation. I thought it was mercy, second chances, third chances, 1,000 chances. But now I saw it. Reincarnation wasn't mercy. It was a cycle of bondage. It was the endless striving to earn something that could only be received. A path without end, because it never pointed to the one who was both the beginning and the end. I stood in silence, not in argument, not in fear, but in awe. For the first time, I truly saw what the choice was. It wasn't Christianity versus Buddhism. It wasn't about different religions or philosophies. It was about something simpler: union or separation, relationship or self-reliance, surrender or wandering. Jesus turned to me, and though he didn't speak again, I heard the question in my heart: now that you've seen which road, will you walk it? And in that moment, with everything I had ever known behind me and eternity stretching ahead, I whispered, with you. I don't remember when I made the decision, but I know I meant it with everything in me. I wanted to stay, not out of fear of what would come, but out of a deep, unshakable longing to never leave the peace of that presence. I had tasted something more real than anything I had ever called life. It wasn't just a place, it was wholeness. There were no edges, no cracks, no lies, no unanswered questions, only truth, only love, only him. I had never felt more alive than I did in that moment, standing in his presence. There was no pain, not because it was absent, but because pain no longer had power. I wasn't floating above suffering, I had moved beyond it. No hunger, no craving, no shadows. What overwhelmed me wasn't what wasn't there, but who was. I had found home. And so I asked, not out of defiance, but from the deepest place in me, Lord, can I stay? The question wasn't spoken with my lips, it came from the essence of my being. My soul ached with love, but also trembled. I knew what I wanted wasn't what would happen. Still, I had to ask. I never wanted to forget the sound of his voice, or the weight of his presence, his pop, or the feeling of being fully known and completely loved. He stepped closer. I felt the gravity of him. Not heavy, holy. His hand rested on my shoulder, warmth flooding through me, almost making me collapse under its power. He didn't look at me. He looked into me. And then he spoke softly. No, you have work to do. My heart broke and soared in the same breath. I didn't want to leave, but I couldn't argue. His words weren't a command. They were an invitation. And though they carried sorrow, they also carried purpose. He wasn't sending me away. He was sending me back. I didn't understand the full assignment, but I didn't need to, because the next words he spoke answered everything I hadn't even asked. There are others like you. Tell them what I've shown you. At that moment, I saw faces. I saw souls, hearts, people all around the world, just like me, searching for peace, trying to be good, trying to be enlightened, but never finding it. I saw temples, homes, universities, prisons, people in silence, people in debate, people weeping in secret. I felt their ache. I felt the same ache I had lived with for so long. They weren't evil, they weren't rebellious, they were lost. And then I understood. I wasn't going back to convince or to conquer. I was going back to tell, to share what I had seen, to tell them who I had met, to tell them that truth wasn't a system, it was a savior. That love wasn't a feeling, it was a person. That peace wasn't found in silence, it was found in Jesus. As the revelation settled within me, Jesus reached out again. This time, his hand rested on my chest, right where my heart was. He looked at me, and with perfect clarity, he spoke. This time, live awake. The words didn't just enter my mind. They went into the core of me. They rewrote something deep within my spirit. I wasn't just blessed, I was marked. A truth had been branded into me that would burn for the rest of my life, and then everything shifted again. The light around him started to fade, not like it was disappearing, but like I was being carried away, gently yet powerfully. I could feel myself falling through layers, not of air but of memory, of time, of something deeper than the body could ever hold. The eternal place I had been in began to blur at the edges, colors melting into shadows, sound fading into silence. A pressure gathered around me, soft at first, then stronger, pressing like 1,000 invisible hands trying to guide me somewhere I no longer belonged. It felt like my soul was being stitched back into my body, thread by thread, breath by breath. I didn't fight it. I couldn't. There was a force greater than gravity pulling me, calling me, deciding for me. And before everything vanished, I said inside myself, without sound, without fear, I'll tell them. I will. Then came the rush. The noise, a sharp, endless beeping, voices rising and falling, the sting of air flooding my lungs like cold fire. I gasped so hard my chest felt like it might burst. I wasn't breathing, I was drowning in life. My body felt soaked, frozen, weighted down. My eyes snapped open and the first thing I saw was the ceiling, white, tiled, unfamiliar. For a long moment I didn't know where I was. Every sound, every light, every smell hit me at once. The light above was harsh, artificial, pale as bone. The air smelled strange, like bleach, latex, and metal. My throat was raw, my tongue thick, my voice trapped somewhere between two worlds. I blinked against the brightness, trying to remember how to exist. Machines surrounded me, beeping steady rhythms like mechanical hearts. I could feel wires stuck to my chest, a mask pressing against my face, something cold taped into my arm. There were people, nurses, a doctor, moving around me fast, their faces serious, voices sharp but distant, like they were speaking through water. My body was shaking. I could hear the sound of my own breath, loud and uneven. Somewhere I realized my wedding ring was gone, and that simple absence hit harder than pain. My hands looked different, older, like time had passed without me. I tried to speak, to ask where I was, but all that came out was a broken sound. Then it hit me. The weight. Not the weight of dying, but of living again. It was heavy, almost unbearable. I felt it pressing against my chest, filling my ribs, flooding my eyes. The machines kept beeping, the nurses kept talking, but none of it mattered. I was back from something too vast to name. And then I started crying. Not the kind of crying you can hide, but the kind that shakes you from the inside. It came out of nowhere, deep, wild, unstoppable. My whole body trembled with it. My face was wet, my chest heaving. I couldn't control it. I didn't want to. It wasn't sorrow. It wasn't joy. It was something sacred, something breaking open. I cried because everything had changed, because everything I had ever believed, everything I thought I knew about life, death, and what waits beyond, had shifted. I remember crying, not because I was scared, but because something deep inside told me that life as I knew it was gone forever. The nurse beside me kept whispering softly, "You're all right, sir. You're safe now." But inside, I wanted to tell her, no, I wasn't that kind of safe anymore. I had seen something beyond safe. I had seen what comes after. When the doctor walked in, I could tell he hadn't slept. His eyes carried that heavy, quiet shock of a man who had seen something he couldn't explain. "You were almost gone," he said, his voice trembling somewhere between relief and disbelief. "We didn't think you'd come back. And then, suddenly, your heart just started again." He said it like he was talking to himself, trying to reason with what he'd just witnessed. But I knew. I just nodded, silent. My body was there, but my soul was still trying to find its way back. The first day, I barely said a word. Every time I tried to speak about what I'd seen, the words broke apart before leaving my mouth. It wasn't that I didn't remember. It was that memory wasn't the right shape for it. How do you tell someone that time doesn't move the way we think it does? How do you describe love that doesn't just live inside you, but wraps around you like it's holding you together? How do you explain that you saw Jesus when you weren't even sure you believed he existed the day before? I couldn't stop shaking. The air in the hospital room felt both heavy and holy. My hands still had the smell of antiseptic and fear. I asked the nurse for my phone. My fingers trembled as I searched the words, Holy Bible, online. Each letter felt like it was leading me back to something I'd always known but never remembered. I didn't know where to begin, so I chose the Gospel of John. The moment I read, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God," I broke again. I wasn't reading it. It was reading me. I don't know how long I stared at that one sentence. It wasn't knowledge. It was recognition. My chest burned with something alive. I had heard that voice. I had seen that light. And now, here it was again, calling me by name. That night, I couldn't sleep. The beeping of the machines around me faded into a strange rhythm, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I asked the nurse if she could bring me a Bible, a real one. She looked at me, a little surprised, and came back with one from the chaplain's office. I held it with both hands, as if it might dissolve if I let go. The cover was worn, the pages smelled of dust and oil, and when I opened it, I started crying again, not from sadness, but hunger. A hunger that didn't come from my stomach, but from somewhere deeper, older. I started to pray, not because I knew how, I didn't, but because I couldn't not. I didn't care if I said the wrong words. I whispered the name that had followed me back through the light, Jesus. I said it again and again, not like a chant, but like a heartbeat finding its rhythm again. In the days that followed, I changed in ways I didn't even notice at first. My old habits didn't fit anymore. My playlists felt empty. The shows I used to binge didn't fill me. Instead, I found myself craving silence, not the kind that hides you from the world, but the kind that listens for something real. I started writing little prayers on scraps of paper, leaving them on my nightstand. Sometimes I would wake in the middle of the night, whispering thank you, not knowing who I was thanking, only knowing it mattered. When the hospital finally discharged me, I didn't rush home. I took a walk through the city instead. The world felt different, brighter, sharper, quieter. Even the noise of traffic seemed softer. I passed a coffee shop where I used to spend hours working, and I didn't go in. I passed a yoga studio I once loved, and I kept walking. I ended up in front of a small church I had never noticed before, hidden between two tall buildings. Its doors were open, just enough to let the sound of a piano drift into the street. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I stepped inside without saying a word. A few people were praying in the pews. A man looked up, smiled gently, and nodded as if he had been expecting me. He didn't ask my name. He just motioned for me to sit. I sat down, trembling, and for the first time in my life, I lifted my hands. Not to the universe, not to energy, not to chance, but to Jesus. I said softly, "I'm yours." When the music stopped, I met the pastor. I told him a little of what had happened. Not all, just enough. He listened quietly, eyes steady, no judgment, no sermon. When I said, I want to give my life to Jesus, he smiled, eyes wet, and said, then you already have. A few weeks after everything changed, I stepped into the water. My body was trembling, but it wasn't fear, it was awe. I had already died once, but this time I was choosing to die and rise again on purpose. The water felt heavy around me, like it was holding me in a moment between two worlds. I came out of it gasping, not for air, but for something else, something deeper. I felt grace, felt it rush through me like a flood, washing away things I never knew were there. And I felt clean, but not in the way I thought I would. It wasn't peace I'd earned, it was peace I'd finally stopped running from. If someone had asked me why I was crying that day, I would have told them the truth. I never knew that truth could wear skin. I never knew that love could burn like fire. For a long time, I wrestled with whether to share this story, not because I'm ashamed of it, no, it's far from that, but because I know what people might think. Some might say I've betrayed my past. They might think I turned to this new path out of desperation, or because I cracked under the weight of something traumatic, or because I lost myself at the edge of death. But here's the truth. I didn't lose clarity when I died. I found it. And I'm not sharing this to turn my back on where I came from. I'm sharing it because of where I've been, because of who I met when everything else was stripped away. The culture I was raised in, the discipline, the reverence, the commitment to inner peace, it still means something to me. I still love those things. But when I met him, I saw something that made me realize all those years weren't just about me searching for something, they were preparing me for what was always meant to come. I didn't walk in lies, I walked in hunger. And when I died, I found the feast. The moment I saw Jesus, I realized something that no one had ever told me. He's not some figure from the past tied to one culture or one nation. He's not a product of a religion or a political movement. He's not some symbol we all get to define. He's the king of everything, the king of all creation. And he knew my name. He'd always known it. For most of my life, I imagined God as far away, unreachable, a distant force who could only be approached through discipline and sacrifice. I thought we had to rise up, climb some mountain to meet him. But now I know the truth. God didn't stay distant. He came down, and his name is Jesus. I'm telling you this not to debate theology, not to sound like I have all the answers. I'm not a preacher. I'm not some great scholar. I'm just a man who died and met the one who holds life. I'm sharing this because I know that there are people out there, maybe people like you, who feel the same hunger I once did. Maybe you've spent years searching through books, through rituals, through silence. You've tried to calm your thoughts, tried to make sense of the chaos inside. But deep down, you know it's not enough. You don't need better meditation. You don't need just more detachment. You need revelation. You need a relationship, not a philosophy. You don't need to reach higher. You need to be held. This message isn't for the people who already feel righteous. It's not just for those who have the right answers or go to church. It's for the seekers, the wanderers, the disillusioned. It's for people like me who spent their whole lives reaching for God in the dark, never knowing he had already turned on the light. I'll never forget the first time I prayed after everything using the name of Jesus. It was quiet, just a whisper. Jesus, I want to know you. And in that moment, it was like the room filled with him, not like some energy or vague idea. He was there, real, alive, gentle, clear, strong, and patient. And the thing that got me the most, he was deeply, deeply in love with me. Since then, things have shifted. Dreams, visions in the night, scriptures that burn in my chest like they were written just for me. Sometimes I wake up in tears, not from sadness, but from the weight of remembering where I was and who brought me back. I don't talk about the dreams much yet, not really, but I will soon because the message isn't over. And I know there are others out there who need to hear it. So if you're watching this, reading this, or listening and something inside is stirring, I want you to know this is for you. If your soul aches, if you've read every book, if you've tried to master silence and meditation but still feel far from peace, if you've never heard Jesus spoken of without judgment, without religion, without pride, this is your invitation. You don't have to figure it all out. You don't have to clean yourself up. You don't have to pick a side or become part of any religious debate. All you have to do is what I did when I was shown the cross. Surrender. Just say his name Jesus, I want to know you, and he will come. Not as a thought, not as some theory, but as himself. And once you see him, really see him, you'll never be the same. I came back from death to tell you one thing. Jesus is real. He is alive, and he's waiting for you. If this stirred something in you, if you're searching or standing at the edge of belief, unsure where to go next, let this be your sign. You're not alone. There are more of us than you think. Like this video, subscribe if you want to hear more, and share it with someone you love who might be silently searching. You never know, someone you care about may be closer to eternity than you realize. Don't keep this to yourself. This story isn't mine anymore. It's ours now. And if nothing else, let me leave you with this. There is no enlightenment without the light himself. His name is Jesus.